Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking Globe International for the great honour of coming here to address you today. It has been a long time since we've had the opportunity to fly to the Northern Hemisphere. So 30 hours on a plane travel, but it was worth it. So thank you for having me along. Can I also acknowledge as well my fellow Aussie in the chamber, Senator Dean Smith, who represents Western Australia. So Dean and I are at polar opposite ends of Australia. And if you know how big the country is, you'll know how far away we are. But we were able to get here together. So it's great to have him here. Australia is the world's driest inhabited land and has been identified as one of the developed nations most vulnerable to climate change. We are a country of climatic extremes with temperatures ranging from the high 40s down to below freezing in some of our other regions. Sometimes you can see some of these events in one day as well. Australia experiences almost every climatic condition encountered elsewhere in the world, along with some that are unique to us as well. Heat waves, cold snaps, floods, droughts, wildfires, air pollution. Australia has it all. I come from Canberra, which may come as a surprise to some, but Canberra is actually the capital of Australia. Who knew that? Some people, yeah, okay, some people knew it. Not Sydney, of course, where that's what everyone thinks, that it is Sydney. And Canberra is within the Australian Capital Territory, geographically very small. We are an island within the state of New South Wales, and our population is 430,000 compared to the 25 million that we have in Australia. So in contrast and comparison to the big cities of Sydney, Melbourne in particular, we are extremely small. As a member of the ACT Legislative Assembly, I'm very proud that we have in the ACT a tripartisan agreement on strong climate action. Canberra is internationally recognised for achieving 100% renewable electricity by 2020 and for our world-leading greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, including 40% reduction of emissions in 2020 and 50% by 2025 and 65 to 70% by 2030. From 1990 levels. We also have an ambitious target, which again was a tripartisan agreement, to reach zero net emissions by 2045. Now, the ACT's climate policies are ambitious. And the reason that we are is because we can. As I mentioned, we are very geographically small. We don't have heavy industry. But we are the home to some of the brightest minds in Australia, if not the world, I'd say. Home, of course, to the Australian National University. In fact, 6 tertiary education organisations within the ACT, and for such a small jurisdiction, that's quite a lot. We know that we have a lot of smarts in our city. And I used my very first budget reply speech as the leader of the Liberal Party earlier this year to say that I really believe that we can be at the forefront of clean energy technology. We know that we've got the community sentiment, the will and the smarts to be able to do it. I won't stand here and tell you that I think it's going to be easy, because it's not. Whilst we have, of course, now achieved 100% renewable electricity, the next phase, beyond COP26, is going to be a challenging road. Transport and gas, which make up about 80% of our emissions, will be a challenge in bringing down. But of course, that doesn't mean that we stop. Consistency and certainty at the federal level, of course, is important, but I have absolutely no doubts that states and territories, and even down to the individual cities within countries, play a massive role when it comes to cutting carbon. Of course, it's important for us to think global, which is why we're here today, but to act local and understand that every step makes a difference. In fact, just before I was coming here, I was asked on local radio, hey, you're the opposition leader of a territory government, what are you going to be able to do? And our emissions are 0.2% of Australia's emissions. But if every single one of us thought like that, we wouldn't get very far. So every step makes a difference, no matter how small. Housing, transport, heating, lighting, urban planning, infrastructure development, these are some of the key leverage points for reduced greenhouse gas emissions in urban areas, and of course they come under the responsibility of our subnational governments. Local governments have always played a role in the international climate regime, and we see fairly ambitious targets all across Australia at the state and territory levels, with those governments also taking climate action very seriously. And as a subnational legislator, I'm in a very unique position to contribute to boosting cooperative climate action by governments at all levels, working with industry, business and other organisations as well. There's no doubt that I think Australia backs technology. There is no doubt about that. And we've heard already earlier today talking about the importance of science, of course, when we're talking about climate action. And that's why I back Canberra, my hometown, because, as I said, we are the knowledge capital and the home to some of the greatest minds in the country. In the economic fallout resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a growing global debate and concern about whether we can afford to build back better without investing in sustainable solutions to the global biodiversity and climate change challenges. And I think the following steps are necessary. The first is to, of course, review the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic. There is no doubt that we're all learning to live in the new COVID normal. The second is to assess the impact on developing countries that are exposed to inequalities, vulnerabilities and financial stresses. The third is to frame an approach to build back better. Structures, systems, processes and a new way of thinking. And we heard a session earlier today, just before lunch, about the role that law and the courts have in this regard too. The fourth is transition. Let's focus on policy commitments, low carbon resilience, decarbonisation, economic and social and environmental well-being. And the fifth is about sustainability. Let's support each other, support countries to maintain the changes over the long term, because frankly, we can't afford not to. I believe that everyone wants action on climate change, and certainly in my home city, it is always a top 5 issue when it comes to what people want from their political leaders. But nobody wants their electricity bills to go up, their lights to go out, or for their jobs to be at risk. Technology may have the answers to a decarbonised economy, particularly over time, and to achieve it in a way that does not deny our citizens, especially in developing economies, their livelihoods or the opportunity for a better quality of life. But it does require leadership and political will, and this is a responsibility on all of us. We, as legislators, are in an enormously privileged position to be the voice for our community, and we all have a duty to leave our planet better and greener for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.